What do you do when you have all of these scraps that are the same size and you want to put them in a quilt, but they don't go together? How can you make it work? Can you make it work? Well, I've got a few practical scrap tips to get you on your way. Hi, I'm Amy and I make things. And in today's video, I'm making all of this make just a little bit more sense. Come on, I'll show you what I mean. I got a question in the comments the other day about how do you make scraps that are disparate colors? How do you make them all work together? And this is a question that a lot of people struggle with. This is a question that even I struggle with. In fact, I'll show you in a little while. A quilt started out with an idea and it didn't come together, right? I mean, it's still a good quilt. All quilts are good. All quilts are good quilts. So, it's still effective. It still keeps me warm. It fits the bed. So, it's great. But the color story, the color execution, not so much. So that's something that I want to address today. And I am working with a lot of the very same fabrics that are in that quilt that didn't work out so well. And today I'm going to try to fix it. And I'm going to fix it using several of the tools that I outlined in this video, plus a few more design elements just for good measure. First thing I'm going to do here, let me show you what I'm working with. Okay, these are the fabrics that I'm working with. These are 3-inch strips, and this was the original group. The very first thing I did was I went through and I got rid of some of the biggest offenders and some things that I thought wouldn't work with the plan that I have, right? I got rid of things that I didn't love, because just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it. All right, so that's the first thing I did. I got rid of everything that I didn't love. And what I'm left with are these fabrics. And you can tell they don't all go together, right? There are a lot of things that if I just put all of these together in squares or in strips, it's going to be a mess, right? It's going to be super busy, which there's nothing wrong with. Super busy. I love a super busy quilt. But what can I do to calm it down and bring it together? And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it smaller. These are 3-inch strips, so instead of using a long 3-inch strip, I'm going to cut them to 3-inch squares. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this, and look, it's just scraps. They're all different navies, right? But I'm going to use a unifying background. I'm going to use navy as my unifying background. All right, I'm going to cut those into 3-inch squares. Now I've got darks and mediums and somewhere in the middle. And that'll give it movement, that'll give it sparkle, but it will still be navy. I'm going to cut these into 3-inch squares, and then, you guys know how I love my fancy patterns. Then I'm going to make, here we go, a 9-patch quilt. And I have here 2 and 1. It will turn out the way it turns out based on how much fabric I have. And then those 9 patches will give my quilt some structure and some architecture, which will also help bring cohesion and unification to the quilt. So I'm going to get started on that. I'm going to cut everything. Well, I'm going to put these in my free table pile. And then I'm going to cut everything into 3-inch squares, and I'll be back to show you how I'm going to lay it out. I pressed all my navy scraps, and I think I may need to pull more, but we'll see when we get there. If I do, I'll just go to the scrap bins and pull some more. And then I made one more pass through my strips, and I pulled out these which I still like and want to keep, but they just, look, they aren't going to have enough contrast to give me the look that I want in the final quilt, so they will get put away for later. And I pulled out these that I'm done with. So these will go in the giveaway pile. And now I'm going to cut. kept these in the stacks with their color groupings because I'm not sure yet if I'm going to mix them all up or if I'm going to keep them together the same in one block. I think I'm going to keep them the same, but we'll lay it out in a minute and see how it looks. Okay, I've cut the navy that I had pulled, and just by the looks of my stacks, I'm going to need to pull more navy scraps. But I'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to put a few of these blocks together, lay them out, see how they look, see how I want to work things. In fact, let me just do that now. I think I'm going to mix and match my navies. We'll see. Let's see what we got. I'm looking at it in the camera. I like that. I like the play of the varying colors within that. But I think I will, here, let me just play a little more tic-tac-toe here. I think I will keep the alternate block. I think I will keep that uniform. So all one print for each one. Instead of mixing mixing them up like this, I think I will keep that. Looking at the camera. Yes. Yes, that is what I will do. I'm going to go put a few blocks together and I'll meet you back here and we'll take a look. I got my blocks sewn and pressed. And let's look. This is where I started. These are the prints that I'm working with. Prints and a almost solid. This is a cross woven. All right. And together like this, kind of a mess. Not a lot of definition. A lot of busyness. And I mean, I like a busy quilt, so don't get me wrong. It's not a complaint. It's not a criticism. It's just stating that this is a lot of busy going on. All right, so let's see what happened. When I lay them out with the navy alternating, let's see. Let's go here. Right, now. Okay, look what happens when they're not all right against each other. Right? It's still busy. No doubt. It is still busy. There are a ton of prints. There are a ton of colors. Warm and cool playing against each other. There are a lot of things at work here. First off, I cut the strips smaller. They were in big chunks. I cut them smaller into these small squares. Then I used a unifying background, and it's not all one color. It's all navy, but it's 4 or 5 different shades of navy, which gives it some movement within that solid. And your background doesn't have to be a solid. In fact, if I run out of solid navy scraps, I have some tonal, some batiks that I'll throw in there as well. Another thing that is working in my favor to help calm this down and make it more pleasing to the brain, not just the eye, but the brain, is that I've given it space by pushing these apart with the solid background or with the consistent background. Then they're all the same shape. I've chosen a familiar block, a 9 patch. People understand 9 patch. So that's familiar. It gives your brain a place to hold on to. And the X's give you a place to hold on to. But all the shapes within each block are also squares. So you've got the square, and then many squares. So those repeating elements, they're soothing. Our minds like that, our brains like that, our eyes like that. We understand it. So I can see, oh, this is a block, and this is a block, and this is a block, because your brain wants to form patterns. So this allows you space to do that while still being busy, and lots of different scraps, right? Things that didn't play well together just on their own. So a unifying background, cutting it smaller. If you have disparate scraps, like the question in the, hang on, I can talk to you. If you have a lot of scraps that don't seem to go together, and maybe they actually don't go together, not in a pleasing way, you can trick the brain, you can trick the eye into believing that they go together by adding an element that does go together, a consistent element that will tie everything together. So the navy blue makes your brain comfortable so you can see the differing elements of individual patterns, and they look intentional rather than haphazard. So the specific question in the comments was about a piano key border. To do this in a piano key border where they're stripped right next to each other, I might create a narrow inner border of a consistent color. It doesn't have to be a solid. I just have this in my hand. And then repeat this inner border every so often. So you line your little strips up together, piano key style. And then every so often, you put a shot of this in there. So it gives you something to hold on to. It gives your mind and your eye somewhere to go so that it breaks up the visual assault that scrap quilts can sometimes be. Now, I happen to like the discord. Inserting a consistent color, a consistent background, it gives your brain a place to rest. It gives you something to hold on to that your brain sees as familiar. Now, I did another thing that I just thought about. This is navy blue. This is not black or white. All right? Black and white are exclamation points. They make colors stand out and light up. And if you're trying to mesh them together, you might want to soften it, not use black or white. I am usually a go-to for navy. I like navy blue because I like navy blue. It doesn't have to even be a neutral. I find navy to be neutral, but it doesn't have to be a neutral. It can be a color. It can be any color. It doesn't have to be a solid. It can be a print. It can be several prints that look very similar, but that read as a single color, a resting place, in contrast to your busy, crazy prints that maybe don't play well right next to each other, but if you give them a break, they look kind of great. So now I have my work cut out for me to sew up all of these blocks. And, you know, when I'm working from scraps, a lot of times I have the beginning of a plan, I have the start of a plan, but I don't know quite where it's going to end up. So I will sew as many blocks of these as I can together, and then, you know, one day soon, I'll come back and lay out the quilt and we'll talk about value. So this is a new segment I'm calling Practical Scrap. A few practical tips to help you work with scraps that are already in your stash or that may come your way so we can get to using those scraps instead of just storing them. I had a sewing day with a friend at a friend's house and I've already made 14 more 9-patch blocks. So I am well on my way and I can't wait to share with you how it turns out and talk about value when I lay it all out. So look for more of these little segments, little short segments with just little tidbits about ways to work, practical ways to work with scraps. You know, I mentioned that navy blue is my go-to for a background unifying color. Navy blue of all sorts. I want to know in the comments, what is your go-to background color or fabric? What do you love that makes everything in your scrap stash or in your fabric stash just sing? What is your favorite? Let me know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more practical scrap tips and more scrappy content. And never, ever forget that you make the world more beautiful just by being in it. I'm Amy, and I'll see you next time.